Welcome back to FlatsClass YouTube, everyone. It's October. Air is getting a little drier and hard bait season is upon us. And what's the number one hard bait that delivers the most explosive strikes? Topwater. That's right. And today on this episode, I'm going to share with you my top 10 tips and tricks to make this bait the most effective bait in your tackle bag. Come on down to the studio. Let's talk about it. FlatsClass fans, is there a more exciting way to catch inshore fish other than topwater? I just can't think of any style of fishing that I enjoy as much as topwater fishing. It's to me, it is the crescendo of excitement. It's an addiction. In fact, there's not a trip that I go fishing that I don't have a topwater setup in the skiff. I mean, it's just, to me, it's that important. And the reason why, it is an alpha bait. It catches alpha fish, and it catches them better than any other lure in my tackle bag. It just does. So, you know, over the years, and I've been a professional guide for 27 years. 27 years. And I was a touring redfish professional for about a dozen years. So I have learned a lot of tips and tricks along the way that have become very valuable to both myself and to a lot of my clients that live and die by these little tips and tricks that I'm about to share with you. So number one, and I'm going to save the best one for last so that you guys hang with me. But number one would be varying the cadence of your topwater bait. To vary the cadence of your topwater bait. So you're going to want your bait not to always be this methodical chop, 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 chop. That's what we all do. We call it walking the dog. Well, walking the dog can be, well, pretty boring at times. So for me, if I'm gonna try to catch a snook, I want it to be as fast as I can. Sometimes skip it across, almost like there's bubbles behind it. That frantic escape look drives snook crazy, and they'll race out to hit something. Speckled trout. Well, speckled trout really do like an erratic retrieve. So they might want it methodical, then you stop it, they pop at it, then you speed it up, they pop at it again, then you stop it. Then you pull it along in the water, and then you pick it up regularly. It's because they shadow it underneath, waiting for a vulnerable moment before they can just collide with it. Speckled trout are famous for that. So that erratic approach, that type of approach works well. And then again, the inferior mouth that a redfish has, that methodical back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth with a few speed ups here and there would probably entice most redfish. But for me, that's the secret, or at least secret number one, to generating strikes, instead of just saying, okay, well, I'm just going to walk the dog, and if that doesn't work, topwater's not on today. No. Vary the cadence. Number two. The number two tip I will tell you is for fish that are hunting prey with their eyes, it is necessary for them, okay, to see the lure. So that means that the water has to be somewhat clear. The clearer it is, the deeper they'll come from the bottom to go get it. I mean, as deep as 10 or 15 feet, they'll come off the bottom to come get it. But in most cases, you have that 50-50 clear. You have a little bit of, I'm going to say, like particulate in the water, algae in the water, and it's like you've got a couple of feet of visibility. You might not be able to see all the way through it, but if it's that 50-50 clear or better, that is the ideal water qualities to think that you can throw topwater. If the water is turbid, sandy, muddy, topwater is not the best choice. In fact, at that point, I would be fishing much shallower to try to make up for it so they could feel it better. Like if you're fishing down in the Everglades and it's kind of muddy around some of the back of the bites and things like that, around laid down trees and things like that. If the water's only that deep, yes, you can still use topwater and generate a strike. But water clarity, very important. Make sure it's clear to at least 50-50 if you want to catch a fish. Next, it's always a benefit to silhouette the bait. So lower light scenarios or periods like dawn, the first few hours of the morning, dusk, the last few hours of the day, or a day where it's just somewhat overcast because a front is approaching or some type of system is approaching. Those are the best times. Can you throw it on a bright day? You can throw it on a bright day. I do it all the time. I reserve that opportunity for days where I've got a little bit of a breeze, not windy, but a little bit of a breeze where you've got that little bit of TPing effect going on the surface that breaks it up, or you've got some current. I'm generally fishing water that's deeper than 2.5, 3 feet. And if it works out for me where I can throw towards the sun so that I can silhouette the bait, the lure on the surface, because if I'm throwing towards the sun, when it comes by them, they're gonna see the silhouette, boom, they're gonna hit it instead of them looking into the sun and you're bringing it, and then it's gonna be like one of those kind of things where they don't wanna go to the sun. They're gonna set up so that they can see a bait before the bait sees them. So think about it that way. 4, this is number 4. 4 would be, I'm always utilizing or employing a setup such as this. I like to use heavier braid. Now, if I'm using spinning gear, heavier braid to me, because I typically use 8 and 10 pound, would be maybe 15 likely, or 20, depends on the scenario. When I'm using this type of gear, casting gear, most of my topwater setups have 30-pound braid on them. I have a few larger ones that have 40-pound braid on them. I like the heavier line. I can make long casts because I'm typically throwing heavier plugs. I use the heavier line more or less because I like to throw around cover, and that's another tip, because I'm trying to catch that big fish. And if he pulls me back into that cover or structure, I'm gonna have a problem. So I like having the heavier braid. Plus, I just feel like I want a product that has zero stretch. I mean zero stretch, so that when that plug hits the water at the very end of my cast and comes up and just whoosh, eats it, I'm gonna be able to set the hook just as good at 100 feet away from me as I could at 30 or 40 feet away from me. It's important. So that's a big deal to me. The other thing you're gonna notice is I like to use short sections of leader. 15 to 20 inches a leader. It's always mono leader. It's generally the lightest leader I use on these setups is 25-pound mono, and the heaviest leader I use on them is 40. You're like, why? Well, psychologically it tells me there's a buffer between the braid, the heavier braid, and the plug. But it also keeps that front hook from wanting to reach over and grab that leader material because it's not too limp. Or some people will tie braid all the way to their topwater plug, and then it does seem like it fouls an awful lot on hard casts, especially casting across the wind or directly into the wind. So I like having that leader there. It also provides a little bit of chafing security as far as rough mouth fish like snook and smaller tarpon. So it does a good job that way. So to me, tip number 4 is definitely up your braid weight and up your leader weight. These are aggressive fish. They are not line shy. Think about it. They're coming up to hit a bait that's on top of the surface. They're trapping it there. They are alpha fish and they are looking to do something. So don't be put off. Don't think that you have to finesse fish that are feeding on top, because generally you don't have to do that at all. All right, let's talk about number 5. This one is more or less a very important lesson. In fact, it's one of the hallmark lessons in my online fishing school, FlatsClass University, which is where I coach you to become the best inshore angler you can possibly be. So if you haven't checked out FlatsClassUniversity.com, you need to. In fact, I'll tell you what, before I tell you what number 5 is, go check out this action from today where we were out there shooting FlatsClass University stuff. I was out there with Miguel, and we were sitting there and we were catching speckled trout on topwater, no less. So check this out. I'll be right back with tip 5.
That's a nice one right there. Oh, I got the shark here.
Grab that net there.
Yep.
See if I can get them. This is where you lose them. Big fish. Well done.
Beautiful.
What a meathead. You opened a few hooks up too. Fish had some weight.
It's a beefy one.
Oh, yeah. That is a beautiful fish, beautiful trout right there. Chunk. Gotta love that.
It's a lot of meat.
A lot of meat. Here we go. Off he goes. Ton of fun out on the water doing lessons for FlatsClass University, and today it just happened to correlate with the YouTube video. Like I said, if you're really interested in doing much deeper dives into learning inshore fishing, FlatsClassUniversity.com is for you. Back to number 5. Number 5 is target the areas that are bait holders. These are going to be zones that have structure or cover. So it's going to be oyster bars, mangrove points, laid down trees, potholes, prop scars, drains out of the marsh. Any place where bait would pool up or hold are fantastic places to work a topwater plug, okay? They're just the best places because the predator alpha fish lives near those zones. That's where he hunts. If you're just casting, the spray and pray method where you just throw every 15 degrees and eventually run across the fish, it's going to take you a long time to catch a lot of fish on topwater. I try to look for areas that I know bait fish would hold on. Sometimes it's isolated pieces of grass patches on a sandy flat. Sometimes it's just a little cut that's got some flow coming through it. I'm looking for things like that so I can up my percentages. It's not a cheat code, it's a talent code. You have to understand what they're looking for. They're looking for those spots where they can ambush prey, especially prey that's swimming on top that's trapped on the surface. Another little tip is to use, I'm going to say this is tip number 6. Make sure you're using round bend hooks. Those are those hooks that you have a straight shank and then they come like a perfect J. They're a perfect J. They don't come back in like an extra wide gap, and they don't have that little 45-degree slice in them and then come up like an O'Shaughnessy. These are true round bend hooks. They have a bigger swing to them so that when they're walking, it allows them to reach out and grab a fish. Now, you'll notice on these, I mash all the barbs down. In fact, in that piece of video that you were watching, you probably noticed how easy it was for me to get the hook out of the fish, and that's because I matched the barbs down on all my lures. I'm not a big inline hook fan for topwater. I feel like it really drops your hookup ratio by a mile. This works much better. It's better on the fish because it's easier once you catch them to get it out. They don't have to choke it to get them. Like lots of times with an inline, you gotta let them eat it before you can literally get them. But this is great. It works fantastic. Round bend hooks. If you want another little pro tip, take this rear hook and find one that is slightly larger than your front hook. I say slightly, not this grotesque beast of a hook, but a little bit bigger. And what it'll do is it'll raise that nose up a little bit when it's resting in the water, and it will walk easier. It also drops this hook a little lower than this one so that they get caught on that back hook a lot. Try it. It'll work for you. All right, let's talk about tip number 7. For me, it's more of a match the hatch. So if I'm fishing a piece of water where most of the finger mullet, in this case, again, I'll pull up my top pup, are 3.5 to 4 inches long, I'm gonna throw a bait like this. If I'm working an area that maybe it's around bridge fenders and things like that, and the mullet tend to be in that 6 or 7 inch size, then I'll go to a 3-hook topwater, a longer topwater, and work that. It really comes down the match the hatch attitude to this. It's simple. The predator hunting in that particular zone is expecting a certain size prey. So you should be throwing that size lure and then try to mimic the speed of that bait to match the rest of them. If you can do that, then you're probably going to have some success. Don't worry so much about the color, because most of you are throwing topwater in those lower light scenarios where it's more about the silhouette than it is about anything else. So the color may not matter nearly as much in that particular setup. Just try to match the size as best you can. I've got a lot of examples as a tournament pro where I'm fishing right next to somebody else, and my lure is 1 inch longer than the lure that they're using, and I'm catching them and they're not. It's really sometimes just the little details that allow you to catch the fish. All right, another one, and this would be number 8. Rattles or no rattles in topwater baits? For me, if the conditions are low light or deeper or breezier conditions, anything, or even maybe if there's a lot of bait present, a lot of mullet present, or a lot of threadfin or some type of bait fish present, some type of bunkers, something like that, then I want rattles. I want something that draws a strike. I want all the help I can get. So in those instances, deeper, darker, or busier, or breezier, I'm gonna want a rattle. If I'm fishing slicker calm water, shallower, it's pretty clear, those are the days it would be to your benevolence to not have a rattle in your surface bait. Maybe you don't even throw a hard bait in that situation. Maybe you throw a soft plastic. Think about it. A soft plastic surface bait. Still has the subtle signature, just doesn't have the noise. All right, number 9. Premature hook elation. Yes, you laugh. But this is the number 1 issue aboard a lot of boats. Premature hook elation, or buck fever. This is the angler who is not patient. He's throwing that topwater. He's working it quick. Here comes the wake. Poof. The detonation on the surface. The plug goes out of the air and he sets the hook, and that bait just skips and tumbles about 6 or 10 feet away from where the action just happened. It's over. The fish is looking around. Where's the lure? I don't see it anymore. It's because you pulled it away. Can't do that. You have to learn patience. A patient, thoughtful hook set when you're fishing a topwater plug. So when this lure is walking up there and that fish is looking up and he comes up and hits it, he might miss it, he might miss it, he might miss it. You gotta wait till he grabs a hold of it. Just because it's gone doesn't mean he has it. It could just be the hydrology of him pulling down and it's just a vacuum pulling that plug down. Wait until you feel that rod tip start to bend and load and you can feel the weight of that fish. Then either reel into him as fast as you can so you can come tight, or strike him then. You do that, you're not going to miss them. And you're going to solve all of your premature hook elation issues. All right, as promised, let's talk about number 10 right now. Number 10. Number 10 to me is there is no wrong time or place to consider using topwater. I use it in almost any scenario that I'm faced with. There are a couple of weedy surface zones, of course, that make it a challenge, but there's even a way around that. But I always think, because there's so much bait around, that if there's bait that's moving on the surface, you see it all the time. You see ballyhoo, you see needlefish, you see glass minnows, you see mullet, you see sometimes feeding pinfish on the surface, you see greenbacks, you see threadfins, you see shad. Almost everything will sit up there where it can be trapped against the ceiling of their environment. So to me, doesn't matter what time of day, what conditions are, there's always a place or a way to use a topwater plug to draw a huge strike. In fact, as a tournament pro back in the days, once I felt like we had a weight that we could cash a check with, I would start in my partnership, I would be the guy that would start throwing topwater looking for that kicker fish, that one fish that would move us up the ladder. And topwater is that bait that does that. It does it a lot, it really does. So if you're having one of those days where you feel like you're not really going to catch a ton of fish, consider using topwater where you can catch at least the quality fish. Like I said, there's a million ways to do this. You could fish that little soft bait, that little jerk shad, unweighted, on top of the water and work it like a topwater, nose hook it. You could take a whopper plopper style or a big prop bait and slurp it really hard around deep sea walls and docks, and you'll draw a strike from sometimes 6 or 10 feet off the bottom. A fish will come up and just whack that thing, orca it. So think outside the box when you're thinking topwater. It's just not about a stick bait walking on the surface in 2 to 5 feet of water. It's a lot of things. There's a lot of ways to work topwater. Lots of times I'll throw them and let the current or the wind carry them up underneath mangrove limbs, and I'll walk them under the shadowed limbs and they'll get blown up under there. There's a lot of ways to do this. Think outside the box. It's my job to coach you that way. If you liked what you learned here today on FlatsClass YouTube, please do us a favor. It helps the channel out a ton. Give us a thumbs up and smash that subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it, honestly. We try hard here. And thanks again for your time. I'll see you right back here tomorrow.